Hi class, my name is Jessica Nicole Suarez, and today I will be discussing a condition that affects a lot of people, often without them knowing. It's called hyperlipidemia. Basically, it means there's a lot of fat in the blood, and that could lead to serious health problems like heart disease or even a stroke. But it is something we can often prevent or even control. Hyperlipidemia is the medical term for having too much fat in your blood. These fats are called lipids, and the two main ones we're talking about right now are cholesterol and triglycerides. Your body actually needs both of them to function. Cholesterol helps make hormones and build cells, and triglycerides stores the energy from the food that we eat. But the problem starts when the levels get too high. That's when these fats can start to build up in your blood vessels and cause damage. The thing is, hyperlipidemia doesn't usually cause any pain, and you don't feel any of the symptoms. You won't feel it even happening, and most people don't even know they have it until something serious happens, like a heart attack or a stroke. That's why it's called a silent condition. But it's more common than you think, especially in the United States, where a lot of people rely on processed foods or diets high in saturated fat, that they don't exercise enough, or have risk factors like diabetes or a family history of heart disease. So even if you feel fine, it's still really important to get your cholesterol checked and take care of your heart health. Now that we know what hyperlipidemia is, let's talk about the types of fat involved, mainly cholesterol and triglycerides. But first, we also have LDL, which is low density lipoprotein. That's what people call the bad cholesterol. It carries cholesterol from the liver to your cells, but if there's too much of it, it could stick to your artery walls and cause blockages, which can lead to heart attacks and strokes. Then there's HDLs, which is high density lipoproteins, and those are the good cholesterols. This one actually helps your body by picking up extra cholesterol from your bloodstream and taking it back to the liver where it gets processed and removed. One way that I was taught to remember if the good is LDL or HDL is that LDL is for low, which means like you want it to be low because it's bad, and H is for happy, so you want those to be high. Finally, there are triglycerides. These are another type of fat that store energy from the food we eat. A little is normal, but high levels, especially combined with high LDL or low LDL, really increase your risk of for heart disease. So even though cholesterol and triglycerides play important roles in the body, balance is key. Too much of the wrong kind, and that's when trouble starts. So let's talk about how cholesterol is supposed to work in a healthy body. Your liver actually makes most of the cholesterol your body needs. It also helps break down fats from the food you eat. Once cholesterol is in your bloodstream, it needs a way to travel since fat and blood don't mix easily. That's where lipoproteins come in. These are like little carriers that move cholesterol through your blood. LDL takes cholesterol from your liver to other parts of the body where it's needed, like for building cells and making hormones. HDL works in the opposite direction. It picks up extra cholesterol from your bloodstream and takes it back to the liver so it can be broken down and removed. Your body also uses triglycerides to store extra energy for food. These are stored in fat cells and used later when you need fuel. When everything is balanced, it all works smoothly. The problem happens when there's too much LDL or triglycerides and not enough HDL to clean it up. Now let's look at what happens when the system we talked about on the last slide stops working properly. This is where hyperlipidemia turns dangerous. When there's too much LDL, it starts sticking to the walls of your arteries, and over time this turnup builds into plaque, a thick hard substance that narrows the arteries and makes them less flexible. This process is called atherosclerosis. As the arteries get narrower, it becomes harder for blood to flow through. That means less oxygen and nutrients to reach your heart, brain, and other important organs. That's why people with hyperlipidemia have a higher risk of heart attack, stroke, and high blood pressure. It's kind of like a pipeline that gets clogged with grease over time. Eventually, something has to burst or it gets blocked. This damage doesn't happen overnight, and many people don't know what's happening. It usually builds up quietly over years, especially if someone has a poor diet, doesn't exercise, or has a family history of high cholesterol. Hyperlipidemia doesn't just affect your blood, it puts stress on multiple organs of your body. The biggest concern is obviously the heart. With too much cholesterol in the arteries, blood flow to the heart is reduced, and that raises the risk of heart attacks and other heart conditions like coronary artery disease. The brain is another major concern. If blood flow to the brain is blocked or reduced, it can lead to stroke, which can cause permanent brain damage or even death. The liver is responsible for producing and clearing cholesterol, but when there's too much fat in the body, it can start to build up in the liver itself. This can lead to something called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. The pancreas can also be affected when triglyceride levels are very high. This can trigger pancreatitis, which is a painful inflammation of the pancreas. And finally, the blood vessels. All over your body can be damaged by plaque buildup. That's why hyperlipidemia is connected to problems like high blood pressure and poor circulation. Along with the causes and risk factors, it's also important to look at who hyperlipidemia can affect the most. It's more common in adults over 45, however, young people can also be at risk, especially if they live an unhealthy lifestyle. Men tend to have high cholesterol earlier in life, but for women after menopause, they have higher risk as well. That's because estrogen helps protect women's heart before menopause, and that protection fades away afterwards. Certain ethnic groups also have a higher risk, like Hispanics, Blacks, and also South Asian populations, especially due to the diets and the foods that they eat, and also could be related to conditions like diabetes. Um, Finally, people who have limited access to healthcare, healthy foods, or safe places to exercise are also most likely to develop hyperlipidemia simply because they don't have the same tools or resources to manage their health. So while anyone can develop hyperlipidemia, some groups are at higher risk, and that makes prevention and awareness even more important. So let's talk about the dangers of hyperlipidemia and how it's diagnosed. If left untreated, too much cholesterol in the blood can lead to atherosclerosis, which is when arteries become hard and narrow. This slows down or blocks blood flow, which can lead to serious problems. One major risk is a heart attack, which often happens when blood can't reach that part of the heart. Another is a stroke, it's when the blood can't reach the brain. Both of these can be life-threatening or cause permanent damage. Hyperlipidemia can also lead to high blood pressure and something called peripheral artery disease, which affects blood flow to your arms and legs. And in some cases, very high triglycerides can lead to pancreatitis, which is painful and dangerous inflammation of the pancreas. Since hyperlipidemia often has no symptoms, it's usually found through blood tests called the lipid panel. This test checks your total cholesterol, LDL, HDL, and triglyceride levels. Doctors usually recommend getting a lipid panel every 4 to 6 years or more often in case you have higher risks. This test is simple and can be life-saving if it catches a problem early. Good news about hyperlipidemia is that it's treatable, and in most cases, it's manageable without medication if it's caught early. The first step is usually making key lifestyle changes. That means switching to a healthier diet, cutting down on saturated fats, and eating more fiber-rich foods like oats, leafy green vegetables, fruits, and healthy fats that can be found in nuts and salmon. These types of foods support heart health and help lower LDL cholesterol. Regular exercise is also super important. Just 30 minutes a day of walking, biking, swimming, or anything that gets you moving and your heart racing. It helps it helps raise HDLs, the good cholesterol, and lowers LDLs and triglycerides. If you're overweight, even losing a small amount of weight can really help improve your cholesterol levels. And quitting smoking is a huge win too. It protects your blood vessels and raises your HDL cholesterol. But sometimes, even with those changes, lifestyle um, alone isn't enough, especially if cholesterol levels are extremely high or if someone has a genetic condition. That's when medications like statins are usually prescribed to help lower LDL cholesterol. Other medications like fibrates, niacin, or omega-3 supplements may be used to help lower triglycerides or raise HDLs. In most cases, the best results come from using both medication and lifestyle changes. That combination can help prevent serious complications and keep cholesterol levels under control. So all in all, hyperlipidemia is more common than a lot of people realize, and it doesn't always show signs right away. That's why it's so important to know your cholesterol numbers and to take your health seriously, even if you feel fine right now. The good news is hyperlipidemia is preventable and manageable. Just a few small changes like eating better, moving more, and getting checkups can make a huge difference. You don't have to be perfect, just consistent. So if there's one thing I hope you take away from this is taking care of your cholesterol is really about protecting your heart, your brain, and your future. Your choices today shape your health tomorrow.